And those are today's headlines. Let's have a closer look, one by one.
The government is set to enforce from next month to March of next year measures to reduce fine dust levels, such as restricting the operation of grade 5 vehicles without low-emission functions.
정부가 다음 달부터 내년 3월까지 미세먼지 계절관리제를 실시합니다. 여기에는 미세먼지 저감 장치를 장착하지 않은 배출가스 5등급 차량의 운행 제한 등이 포함됩니다. Tell us more.
Well, the government's decided to expand the scope of regions where these grade 5 emission vehicles without low emission functionalities will be restricted. So prior to now, it had just been for certain hours and days in the metropolitan area, Busan and Daegu, the biggest cities. But now they're going to expand that to include Daejeon, Gwangju, Ulsan, and Sejong from next month.
Otherwise, of course, officials expect the air quality to get quite bad.
Right. Also, 15 coal plants will also be halted until next March as well.
Coal plants, of course, plants here refer to factories.
Correct. Right.
Okay, let's have a look at the main vocabulary. The first one is to enforce something.
Well, we're usually talking about rules or some measures, and you enforce something. You basically force people to obey or follow those rules or measures.
네.
And if you don't follow them, then you'll get fined
Right.
or there'll be some punishment. You'll face some repercussions.
Absolutely. Enforcing something, 어떠한 법이라든지 규칙을 집행하도록 하는 것을 말합니다. 자, 그 다음에는 restrict라는 동사도 한번 같이 볼까요?
When you restrict something, you limit who can access. Usually we're talking about, say, for example, there's restricting you. Sometimes they will, if someone owns a building, they'll restrict access to certain parts of the building. When I was a kid, if I wanted to see, certain movies would be restricted, R-rated.
Right.
So it means it's limited to people who are over 18 years old. So when you restrict something, you're limiting who's able to access it or who's able to see something or who's able to go into a certain place.
Exactly. Those labels differ by country.
Right.
In Korea, we just have, I think it's 19, which is the equivalent of an R
Sure.
in English-speaking countries. 네, 우리는 이제 19세 미만 관람 불가인가요? 이렇게 그 영화 누가 봐도 되는지 레이블링 할 때 보통 나이 기준으로 우리는 구별을 하죠. 근데 외국에서는 이제 알파벳이 있어요. PG 그러면 parental guidance 부모님의 보호 하에 봐도 되는 거. 그다음에 R라고 써 있으면 restricted입니다. 이 단어예요. 제한돼 있다라는 뜻인데 이 자체가 19세 미만 보면 안 된다. 청소년 관람 불가라는 뜻입니다. What else is that? U is for like universal or everyone? No? Is that no? Oh, well, I forget what the other labels are for movies.
There was one called NC-17, which was like the highest one. That usually, like, you couldn't even get that in movie theaters. So if movies got that rating, they would usually do edits so they could get the restricted rating so they could be put in movie theaters.
So that's even higher than R?
Yeah.
Oh, really? 여러 가지 레이블들이 지금 우리가 구체적으로 영화 레이블 얘기하는 건 아니지만 다릅니다. 그리고 그중에서 영어에서 R라고 되어 있는 게 이 단어예요. restricted, 제한된다.
When you see anything restricted, it just means there's a limit.
Yeah.
Not everyone is going to be allowed.
Sure. 네, 출입이 제한될 수도 있고요. 그때도 entry is restricted 하면 되겠습니다. Let's have another look at the headline. The government is set to enforce from next month to March of next year measures to reduce fine dust levels, such as restricting the operation of grade 5 vehicles without low emission functions. Let's move on.
Olaf Scholz has pledged to finalize the 2024 budget by the end of this year in a video message that sought to reassure spooked citizens and investors in Europe's largest economy after a court ruling tore up its spending plans.
독일 헌법재판소가 올해 및 내년 국가 예산안의 위헌 결정을 내린 후 올라프 숄츠 총리가 국민과 투자자들을 안심시키기 위한 대국민 영상 메시지를 통해 내년 예산안을 올해 안에 마무리할 것을 약속했습니다. He's pledged to finalize this budget for next year. There's been a few turn of events in Germany. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, yeah, so this government, they were sort of forced to freeze most of their new spending plans because a constitutional court last week declared its plans. They wanted to reallocate pandemic funds to green projects and industry subsidies as well. It was something, I think it was 60 billion euros. And then this constitutional court declared that as unconstitutional and said, no, you can't do that. So now the government is kind of in panic mode and they're trying to figure out what they can do here. They're saying they're going to ask the government to lift, it's called Germany's debt brake. So there's a limit. Again, there's a limit to how much their budget deficit can be. So the budget deficit can only be 0.35% of GDP. This was first adopted back in 2009 after the financial crash. But during the pandemic, the brake was suspended. So now they're kind of in that position of, do we go back again and ask to get the brake lifted again just after it just got put back in place? A recent poll suggested that it's just a minority of Germans that support suspending the debt brake. They're saying only 23% of people actually agree with this. 57% want this budget shortfall to be covered by spending cuts.
Okay, so they want everything more tightened, under control.
Yeah, like don't take on additional debt just because you can't, just to suit your budget. Fix your budget then. Don't spend as much money. Don't take more debt.
네, budget가 예산안이죠. 이제 원래 생각했던 예산안, 내년의 예산안이 unconstitutional하다, 위헌이다라는 결정이 독일 헌법재판소에서 나옴에 따라 이제 다시 버짓을 세워야 되는 상황이고요. Spending plans have been freezed라고 표현을 하셨는데 지금 제동이 걸린 거죠. 여러 가지 지출 계획이라든지 그런 것들이 예산안에 따라서 일단은 다 스탑이 됐는데 올해 말까지는 그래도 내년 버짓에 대한 결정을 내리겠다. 이렇게 안심을 시키려는 독일 숄츠 총리의 영상 메시지가 있었습니다. Let's have a look at the main terms. The people of Germany were spooked.
Yeah, if you're spooked, you're scared. Usually, like, something can scare you, right?
Yeah.
Like a loud noise you might hear outside. Whoa, what was that? It spooked
Spooky.
you. Something is spooky. Something scary. Something can spook you. Like a few weeks ago, I went for a walk in this park fairly near my house, and I just went on some pathway. It was kind of dark. There was people around. It wasn't that late at night, and then I saw these big creatures in the bushes.
Oh,
and I was like,
goodness.
those are giant cats. And I got a little bit closer and they were raccoons.
Oh,
And I have
really?
never seen raccoons in Seoul before.
Seoul?
Yeah.
In the wild?
Yeah. I saw 3 of them that night.
What?
And it spooked me. I told my wife to go back later on that week and she went and saw them too.
Shouldn't this be reported? Oh my goodness.
No,
I've
there's
never
raccoons
heard of-
now.
Really? I didn't know that.
I didn't either. So it spooked me. I was like, oh my, like,
그래요?
I'm getting out of here.
저녁 때 그냥 산책 다니다가 갑자기 그 잔디 있는 캄캄한 곳에 뭔가 보여가지고 뭐지 했더니 라쿤 3마리를
They're like
봤다고요?
this big too.
진짜?
In Canada, there's tons of them. You see them like dead on the road and stuff all the time. You see them, but like I'd never seen them in Korea before.
그래서 그때 spooked 됐다는 겁니다. 깜짝 놀란 거예요. 뭔가 이렇게 무서울 때 보통 우리가 spooky 하면은 귀신 생각 많이 하거든요. 그래서 이런 소리가 spooky한 사운드죠. Something that's quite different but can be translated as similar in Korean is creepy. Now that's very different. 그러니까 사람한테 creepy라 그러면은요. 좀 위험한 사람처럼 느껴질 때, so this person could be quite dangerous, I suppose, if you find someone creepy. It could also be scary.
Yeah, we
but-
also use that's how it like
yeah.
originally was used, right?
Yeah.
A creepy movie,
I
right? It's a
see.
spooky movie. It's scary, but then right, the whole idea of a person being creepy
Yeah.
and a person being spooky is different.
Yes.
Spooky is they're scaring you. Creepy is like
Could be quite dangerous.
yeah, or like right, not a good person, maybe. But
It could be in an
weirdo.
R-rated movie.
A weirdo, yeah.
자, spooky. 예, 이거 뭐 이제 많이 쓰는 표현인데요. spooked 하다, ed 이렇게 붙이면은 겁먹은 겁니다. So the people of Germany were spooked because of the budget plans that were
as
to
they
rise.
as they would be.
Yeah. And then the next expression here is to tear something up.
So literally, to tear something up, here's a piece of paper, right? Like, oh, I've had enough of this script. It's terrible. That's it, right? Like you tear something up. Literally, that's what it means, though. You rip it up and throw it
Look at
away.
the expression on our production team's faces.
I was just joking. The script is great. But like, that's kind of what it means, right? So in this case, the court saw their spending plans and not literally, they figuratively ripped them up and
Yeah.
said start over from scratch again.
네, tear up, 찢어버리다. 여기서는요. 비유적으로 쓴 표현이죠. tear up plans, 계획에 이제 제동을 걸었다라는 뜻으로 보면 되겠습니다. Well, here is the headline again. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has pledged to finalize the 2024 budget by the end of this year in a video message that sought to reassure spooked citizens and investors in Europe's largest economy after a court ruling tore up its spending plans.
Cases of mycoplasma pneumonia have been surging in northern China, particularly among children, sparking speculation online of a new pandemic threat.
마이코플라스마 폐렴 감염 사례가 중국 북부 지역에서 어린이들을 중심으로 증가하면서 새로운 전염병 유행 가능성에 대한 우려가 온라인에서 확산하고 있습니다. Oh dear, tell us more.
Well, Chinese health authorities, they've said these rising infections are a mix of already known viruses, and they said it's linked to the country's first full cold season after the COVID restrictions were lifted last December. So they've emphasized that the full situation, this is experts have been saying this, the full situation does remain a little unclear at the moment, but experts are saying there is little to suggest that these cases were caused by some new virus. So last week, the WHO, they repeatedly criticized Beijing before, for a lack of transparency during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
They have requested more information from China regarding this. Beijing responded by saying there's been no detection of any unusual or novel pathogens. This was according to a statement released by the WHO as well.
Okay.
That this is what China told them.
중국 입장은 일단은 기존에 있었던 바이러스들이 지금 혼합이 된 것이다. It's a mix of already known viruses. 그다음에 이제 WHO 세계보건기구에서는요. 이 관련된 자료를 달라. 보건 자료를 지금 요청한 상태이고요. 중국에서 역시 같은 입장을 WHO에게도 내보이고 있답니다. 뭐 새로 생긴 어떤 그런 변이 바이러스라든지 이런 것은 아니고 기존에 있었던 것들이 믹스가 돼서 지금 또 팬데믹 이후에 처음으로 찾아온 그런 감기 시즌, the full cold season이라고 표현을 했는데요. 그렇기 때문에 지금 확산하고 있는 것으로 보여진다. 이런 내용인데요.
Definitely can spook you though when you start hearing about viruses
from China,
and
yeah.
illnesses coming out of China.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
That's definitely where this is coming from, even though the
Sure.
headline is a little bit sensationalist,
Yeah,
right? Makes you a little bit
exactly.
afraid.
Yeah, people are spooked, as you said.
Yes.
It's sparking some speculation, especially online.
Right. So when there's speculation, it means people are talking about something. They're asking questions. Some
Yeah.
people are drawing conclusions, having discussions about something. When you speculate, you say what possibly could be happening, even though you don't know for sure. There's
Is
no
it
proof.
this? Is it that?
Could it be? Yeah, I think it is.
Oh.
It might be that, though. So everyone's
if?
talking. Exactly. That's when people are speculating. What if it's this? What if it's that?
Yeah.
It could be this. I heard it's that.
이건가? 저건가? 이러면 어쩌지? 이런 것들이요. 영어로는 what if 이렇게 그냥 짧게 표현을 하기도 해요. 그러니까 이게 뭐냐면은 여러 가지 추측이죠. 그런 것들을 speculation이라고 합니다. spark speculation은 여러 가지 추측에 불을 붙이는 것이 되겠죠.
When you think of spark, it's that thing that starts something. So
Yeah.
you need a spark to start a fire. Spark speculation, it's that thing that has caused everybody to start talking.
특히 가장 많이 나오고 있는 speculation은 또 다른 팬데믹의 위험이 불어닥치는 거 아니야? Is it another pandemic threat? That's what they're worried
The
about.
last thing I want to hear right now.
So what's a pandemic threat?
What's the threat of a pandemic?
Yes, literally.
I don't really know how else to explain it, but it's
Okay.
something that could cause
Sure.
another pandemic. If there's a threat of something, like if you talk about there's the threat of danger, it means you could possibly be in danger. If there's the threat of a pandemic, it means a pandemic could potentially start again because of this.
그렇죠. 또다시 이렇게 전 세계적으로 확산되는 그런 팬데믹이 오는 거 아니냐. 그런 threat, 위협에 대한 우려가 많이 나오고 있다라는 얘기로 보시면 되겠습니다. But China says no.
China has said no, and experts are saying no. But you know,
Okay.
the WHO is they're on the case.
Right.
If
They're
that,
looking
if
into
that
it.
makes you feel any better.
Yep, they're looking into it. All right, this is the headline again. Cases of mycoplasma pneumonia have been surging in northern China, particularly among children, sparking speculation online of a new pandemic threat. Now let's move on to headline number 4.
NASA has successfully received data from a record-breaking distance using a near-infrared laser encoded with test data from an astonishing distance of nearly 10 million miles.
미국 항공우주국 나사가 테스트 데이터가 담긴 근적외선 레이저를 1000만 마일, 즉 1600만 킬로미터라는 기록적인 거리에서 수신하는데 성공했습니다. Right, let's have a look at this.
10 million miles.
10 million, wow.
That is 16 million kilometers.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is this distance is approximately 40 times farther than the space between Earth and the moon. So
40
if
times.
that gives it any type of, puts it in context.
Yeah. 지구와 달, Earth and the Moon 사이의 거리의 40배 정도에 달하는 것이다 라고 지금 설명을 해주셨고요. Because it's quite hard to fathom when you hear numbers like that. 10
Right.
million kilometers.
Yeah, what's the
16
10,
million,
10 15 million? What's
Yeah.
the difference, right? They've called this achievement first light. So this represents a significant advancement in increasing data transmission capabilities throughout the solar system. So that's quite a big one. NASA compared this upgrade in communication technology to the shift from traditional telephone lines to fiber optics. So now they're saying the use of this optical communications, as they call it, using lasers, it's expected to enhance the capacity of their current state-of-the-art radio systems that are used on spacecraft. They're saying it's going to improve this by from 10 to 100 times.
Wow, better telecommunications then.
Oh, like
Way better.
Yeah, they don't even know how much better. They're saying like,
wow.
you know, it could be 10 times better. It could be 50 times better. We could eventually have, you know, our communication systems could be 100 times better than they are right now. And when you hear current state of the art, that sounds good.
It does,
But
absolutely.
actually, in a couple years, it might be nothing.
Maybe one day we'll be having phone calls in space, and it'll be
From Mars, right?
From Mars,
like,
or yeah.
oh, it's
wherever.
Aunt Betty calling from Mars. Like,
Who knows? All right, let's have a look at the first expression, which is to be encoded with something.
means encrypted, so something is put into code, some type of messages. You know, a lot of our text messages, a lot of different apps do encode that material, end-to-end encryption. Korean ones don't have that.
네, encode, E-N-C-O-D-E라고 하면은 이게 부호화가 됐다라는 뜻이 되겠습니다. So we're looking at near infrared laser encoded with test data라고 쓰여 있는데요. 그러니까 테스트 데이터가 들어있는, 담긴 근적외선 레이저가 되겠습니다. 자, 그 다음에 astonishing.
Very surprising, shocking.
Wow.
Or you can say you're astonished by something as well, if something is just so incredible, so amazing.
That's right.
It can even be in a way sort of bad too, right? Something can be so surprised you were astonished that happened.
Sure. 정말 믿기 힘든 놀라운 것을 astonishing이라고 표현을 합니다. Well, here's the headline again. NASA has successfully received data from a record-breaking distance using a near-infrared laser encoded with test data from an astonishing distance of nearly 10 million miles.
3 recently rediscovered handwritten pages of Charles Darwin's magnum opus, Origin of Species, have been published for the first time, along with all the other known surviving pages in a new online edition.
찰스 다윈의 대표작 종의 기원의 자필 초고 중 최근 새롭게 입수된 새 부분이 남아있던 기존 원고와 함께 새로운 온라인 판본을 통해 처음으로 공개됐습니다. The Origin of Species and a rough draft. All right, so tell us more about this.
Well, previously about 50 pages were known to survive or have survived.
Yep.
This new edition is going to include 7 pages not previously found in any other collection. So there's going to be a total of 59 draft pages that you can look at in his handwriting.
That's amazing.
Apparently a little bit hard to decipher his handwriting, but nonetheless, you can see it. So these these rough drafts of Darwin's Origin of Species, some of these have become the most valuable pieces of paper in science, in the history of science.
Sure.
Some of them each worth close to $1 million. So in 2018, this was when the most recent one was sold at auction. It went for 490,000 pounds. So that's about $600,000-$700,000.
Sure. 그러니까 뭐 그냥 낙서된 종이라고도 볼 수 있겠지만 그냥 종이가 아니죠. 지금 상당히 큰 액수에 팔렸다. Did you say it had been sold or it's worth that?
Oh, it had been sold. It was 2018. Yeah.
2018년도에 상당히 큰 액수에 또 팔리기도 했었는데요. 그럴 수밖에 없죠. 이제 직접 다윈이 자필로 쓴 handwritten rough draft 초고가 되겠습니다. 그게 이제 최근에 조금 더 발견이 됐고요. 기존에 있었던 또 한 50장까지 합쳐서 총 59장의 요 드래프트가 이번에 공개가 됐다라는 얘긴데요. Now, when we say this is Charles Darwin's magnum opus, what are we talking about?
His most important or significant work.
Yeah.
The thing he put most of his time into is his life's work, and
Yeah.
that thing that's considered the most important.
Right. So for Charles Darwin, that would be The Origin of Species. If we were to talk about musicians, it could be their music.
Yeah, their
right?
biggest album,
Yeah.
most successful album,
yeah.
for example.
magnum opus라는 거는요. 어떤 작가나 아니면은 뭐 학자의 대표작, 최고 작품을 얘기합니다. 이게 밴드가 될 수도 있고요. 음악가가 될 수도 있고 지금 이렇게 과학자가 될 수도 있습니다.
Like a director, their biggest movie, the movie that was the most successful, that really put
Yeah.
them on the map, you could call it. And I think
course.
it probably is a little bit subjective for some, in some cases too,
Yeah,
right?
It could be.
If you've made a lot,
Yeah.
you know.
네, 영화 감독의 이제 대표작 얘기할 때도 This director's magnum opus is 뭐 이렇게 말할 수 있겠네요.
It makes it sound more important if you say that,
Yeah.
right? Then, what is this? It's their magnum opus. This must be important.
That's right. And if something is surviving something,
Means it remains. So a lot of times you'll see it when someone passes away, they'll talk about their surviving family members or their surviving children. You'll see that. In this case, it means most things were gone. There was only some left over.
That's right. Surviving 무엇이라고 하면은 남아있는, 아직까지 잔존하는 라는 뜻이고요. 사람에 대해서 쓸 때는 이제 돌아가신 분의 surviving family members, 유족이 되겠습니다. Here's the headline again. 3 recently discovered handwritten pages of Charles Darwin's magnum opus, Origin of Species, have been published for the first time, along with all the other known surviving pages in a new online edition. 5 headlines. Let's have a closer look at these one by one.
South Korea has been ranked 49th out of 113 countries and regions in terms of English language skills this year, down 13 notches from a year ago.
세계 113개국을 대상으로 산출한 올해 영어 능력 순위에서 한국은 49위에 올라 작년보다 13계단 하락한 걸로 나타났습니다. Let's talk about this then.
Yes, so this is done by an English language education company called Education First. They're from Switzerland, and they have their 2023 English Proficiency Index. They've been doing this since 2011, and they rank non-English speaking countries based on the results of their standardized test for English.
Okay.
So they're basing the rankings on about 2.2 million people, all adults, all over the age of 18, over these 113 countries who took the test last year. And South Korea, last year they were in 36th place. This year we're at 49th, so down 13 places. We're still ahead of China, who's at 82, and Japan at 87. They're also down from last year. Unsurprisingly, I think, and I'm not sure why they're described as a non-English speaking country, is Singapore, because Singapore is English is spoken
country.
all over the place. But they're number 2, with Netherlands at number 1. So Singapore's the highest ranking Asian country, and Korea's not doing too badly.
Okay. But we did go down.
Yeah, we did go down, but
Yeah.
we could go back up again.
자, 스위스의 영어 교육 기업인 Education First에서 이렇게 랭킹 리스트를 만듭니다. 그래서 2011년부터 계속 만들었다고 하고요. 2023년 현재는 113개국 중에 우리가 49위예요. 작년에는 36위였나요? 그래서
네.
13계단 떨어졌습니다. 이제 그 기준이 되는 테스트가 EF 스탠더드 잉글리시 테스트라고 하는 이 시험 결과를 가지고 평가를 했다고 하고요. 놀랍지 않습니다. 싱가포르가 이제 아시아 국가 중에서는 영어 실력이 가장 좋은 걸로.
네.
네, 그렇습니다. And the number one country was the
The
Netherlands.
Netherlands. And the Netherlands,
그렇죠.
they're very good at English.
맞아요. 네, 그렇습니다. 그 네덜란드가 이제 전체 1위를 했다고 해요. 자, 표현 한번 볼까요? In terms of something.
If we talk about something in terms of something, we're going to look at one particular thing, one particular aspect or one particular feature. So here we're looking at English language skills, the rankings. Excuse my
squills.
pronunciation. Yeah, so we're looking only at English language skills in terms of ranking, not anything else, not number of people in the country, not the GDP, not whatever it may be. It's in terms of this one thing only.
어떠한 면에서 무엇에 관해서 할 때 in terms of something이라고 합니다. In terms of getting our tongue tied, I think we're on the same page this morning because
Yes.
I was like that with some of the headlines earlier on.
We need to brush up on our squills, Sue.
Indeed. 자, in terms of something이 있었고요. 그 다음에 13 notches. Notch 보겠습니다.
Yeah, a notch is a small indent. For example, it used to be a way that you would tell what day it was. You might put a notch in a tree to say, oh, it's another day has passed. But we use it when we're talking about rankings, when we're talking about levels, meaning our position. So one notch is one step or one position. So 13 notches means we've gone down 13 positions, 13 places.
예전에는 그러니까 나무에다가 이렇게 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 이렇게 짝대기를 그었던 것 하나하나가 notch라고
Yeah, it makes me think of
불렀군요.
Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah, exactly. 그런 이제 눈금 같은 거 하나하나를 notch라고 부르는데요. 우리말로는 13계단 하락했다고 하지만 영어로는 13 stairs라고 하지 않습니다. 네, 이건 조금 다른 표현을 쓰는데 여기서는 13 notches. You could just say it fell down 13 spots.
13 places.
Places,
Yeah, there is
yeah.
lots of ways to say the same thing. Notches is a term, though, that's used, but it's quite an old term because it's not just writing, it's actually carving into wood.
That's right. 그래서 notches fell down 13 notches. Well, here's the headline again. South Korea has been ranked 49th out of 113 countries and regions in terms of English language skills this year, down 13 notches from a year ago. 9.
Dengue fever has killed more than 1,500 people in Bangladesh so far this year, while the number of cases increased by 971 to a total of over 308,000 as of Sunday.
올해 방글라데시에서 댕기열로 인한 사망자가 지금까지 1,500명 넘게 발생한 가운데 지난 일요일 기준 신규 감염자는 971명이 늘어 댕기열 총 환자 수는 30만 8천 명 이상인 것으로 알려졌습니다. My goodness, that's a staggering amount of people.
Oh, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
The death toll, in fact, is getting close to 1,600. It's at 1,598 as of Sunday morning. And we're talking almost 1,000 cases in a day in the 24-hour period.
So dengue fever is transmitted through mosquitoes.
Well, yes, this is the big issue. And what they've been facing, one is a prolonged monsoon. And mosquitoes love the rain because
they
that's
like
how they
damp
procreate.
areas, sure.
They've also had rising temperatures, and so they've had a lot of these mosquitoes. And the mosquitoes, if they bite you, you know, you can get infected with dengue fever, and that puts you in a very dangerous position.
Oh dear.
So we're talking like in that 24-hour period to Sunday morning, in Dhaka alone, 217 patients were admitted. And then other districts were recording 754 new cases. It's a really serious situation. It's a really serious disease. So hopefully they can get a handle on it. Hopefully they can get rid of the mosquitoes. And hopefully people can get back to normal.
네. 토요일에서 일요일 아침까지 24시간 이 기간 안에만 환자 수가 200명 이상이었다. 다카 지역에만 그렇고요. 예, 전체적으로 이제 방글라데시에서 봤을 때는 700명 이상이었다고
Yeah, so in
하네요.
total 971 for the whole country.
Just for the 24-hour period that we're talking about.
Yeah, so we're talking
하루 만에.
over 308,000 people this year have been infected in
My
Bangladesh.
goodness. 자, 그러면은 첫 번째 표현 보겠습니다. This is so far this year.
Yeah, we talk about so far this year, so far this week, so far this month. That means up until now. We're talking about a period of time. We can just say so far, meaning until now. So basically, whatever it is, whether we're talking about the progress of something, whether we're charting the spread of an epidemic or a pandemic, we're saying until this point, within this period of time.
Ask me how you think the show is going so far.
How's the show going so far?
So far, so good.
Very skillful.
자, so far는 지금까지라는 뜻이 있어서요. So far, so good. 그러면 지금까지 좋아 이런 뜻이고요. So far this year. 올해 지금까지. So far this week. 그러면 이번 주에 지금까지.
So far this morning.
Yes. 오늘 중 이제 지금까지라고 하고 싶으면 뒤에다 this morning을 붙이면 되겠습니다. 자, 그 다음에는 to increase by something.
Yes, we're talking about a number here. We have increase and decrease, meaning growing or reducing. In this case, we're increasing by a number, so increasing by 971. Or, for example, I increased my vocabulary by 3 words this morning. I learned 3 new words.
And the difference between increase by and increase to
Yes, 2 will be the
very big.
total.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you increase to this number, that is the total number, where if you're increasing by, we're adding by this amount.
네. increase by 얼마라고 하면은 이만큼 늘었다라는 뜻이고요. 그 다음에 총 숫자 여기까지 뭐뭐로 늘었다 하고 싶으면은 increase to 하면 되겠죠. 예를 들자면은 한 반에 20명이에요. 근데 학생이 2명 늘었어요. 그러면 the number of students increased by 2. The number of students increased to 22.
Yes.
이렇게 하면 되겠습니다. 자, 다시 한번 읽어볼게요. Dengue fever has killed more than 1,500 people in Bangladesh so far this year, while the number of cases increased by 971 to a total of 308,000 as of Sunday.
Artificial intelligence system developed by a multidisciplinary research team has accurately diagnosed autism spectrum disorder in children between the ages of 2 and 4.
의학계 여러 분야로 이루어진 다학제 연구팀이 개발한 새로운 인공지능 시스템이 2세에서 4세 사이 아동의 자폐 스펙트럼 장애를 정확하게 진단해냈습니다. Okay, tell us more about this.
Oh, this is fascinating.
It is.
So what they have this AI system that's able to look at brain tissue images from DT MRI scans, and then it sort of finds these markers that are indicating how much the brain is connecting between different regions. And then using various algorithms, I can't tell you how it works, so I'm not a scientist, they're able to compare the patterns in the brain of a normal child, a neurotypical child, with those with autism. And so what they're able to do is detect autism accurately, a 98.5% accuracy rate for kids between the age of 24 and 48 months.
And I presume this is younger than what they were able to do before.
Yeah, but also it's a case of being able to say, yep, your child has an issue and we can therefore deal with it. But also they can look at the severity of the issue and they can grade it, because I think for a long time people looked at autism and thought of Dustin Hoffman as Rain Man. But autism is a wide spectrum.
Yeah.
And there are people who are more high functioning, people who aren't able to speak and so on. So what they're able to do is to give it a grade, which means when it comes to therapeutic intervention, when it comes to helping the child, they can more accurately give them the help they need early on.
An accuracy rate of 98.5%. 정확도가요 98.5%라고 합니다. 굉장히 어린 24개월에서 48개월 사이 2세에서 4세 사이의 아이들의 요 어린 나이에서도 이미 이제 MRI 스캔 등등을 이용해서 오티즘 스펙트럼 디소더라고 하죠. 이 자폐 스펙트럼 장애 이것을 정확하게 진단을 할 수 있는 기술이 AI를 통해서 이제 개발이 됐다라는 얘긴데요. 표현 한번 보겠습니다. This was according to a multidisciplinary research team.
Yes. Now, one thing not to get confused of is 2 very different meanings for discipline. One meaning is your skill, your speciality, your technique, what you are an expert in. The other is punishment. So if you discipline someone, you're not giving them a skill, you're punishing them by giving them detention or fining them. And you can have a disciplinary hearing, for example, which is where someone's going to get punished. But here we're talking about skills. A multidisciplinary research team, meaning this research team didn't just have one specialization, they had many specializations, several. So that means they were able to take a more rounded look at their focus on diagnosing autistic children.
여러 가지 학문, 여러 가지 분야를 여기선 multidisciplinary라고 하는데요. discipline이라는 게 이런 그 학문 분야를 말합니다. 그러나 또 다른 완전히 다른 의미의 discipline은 훈계나 훈육 같은 것을 뜻하기도 하죠. 이제 여기선 그런 의미는 당연히 아니고요. A research team with many different experts from different disciplines.
Yes.
그런 의미가 되겠습니다. 여러 분야의 전문가가 함께한 그런 연구팀이 같이 개발한 것이고요. And they were able to diagnose this accurately.
Yeah, exactly. They were able to get it 98.5% accurate. So not 100%, but very accurately. So accurately here, it's going to mean you're getting it exactly right, but it can also mean you're getting it truthfully. You're being very truthful and you've got the right information, the right facts about something.
That's right. Accurately, 아주 정확하게. Well, I'm going to try and accurately read the headline again.
Good luck.
Thank you. A new artificial intelligence system developed by a multidisciplinary research team has accurately diagnosed autism spectrum disorder in children between the ages of 2 and 4.
I'll give you a 98.5% on that.
Thank you so much. I'll take that. Let's move on to the next headline.
Climate activists in Australia staged a floating blockade of shipping traffic using a fleet of kayaks at the country's largest coal port over the weekend, resulting in more than 100 arrests.
호주의 기후활동가들이 지난 주말 자국 최대 석탄 수출항 앞에서 카약을 타고 해상 운송을 막는 시위를 펼쳐 이중 100명 이상이 체포됐습니다. Right, so this was a huge protest. Tell us about it.
Yes. First of all, we'll get outside of the confusion because I'm going to tell you that 5 miners were arrested. And I'm not talking about coal miners, M-I-N-E-R. I'm talking about minors, M-I-N-O-R.
Underage.
Meaning teenagers or children. A 97-year-old pastor, a reverend, was also arrested. So 100 people in total, obviously very passionate about their cause, but breaking the law.
Yeah.
So what the police did is they said, you can have your protest for 30 hours, but if you don't leave, we're going to arrest you. And after 30 years, some people 30 hours. I'll give myself a 75.3% accuracy on that. Some activists, after the 30 hours, refused to leave. And so therefore, sorry, we gave you the time, but you're over the time, therefore you have to be arrested.
They were given a time limit.
Exactly. Now, this protest goes on every single year. It's been going since 2016. What they want to do is to end new coal projects, and they also want to tax on coal export profits. The issue in Australia is they've been cracking down on climate protests. They've been enacting tougher laws, and some people have criticized that. They're saying people have the right to protest. In this case, the police gave them time, but if you go over the deadline, you're going to get arrested.
자, 지금 30시간 동안은 시위를 할 수 있는 그런 퍼미션이 주어졌었는데요. 그것이 넘어가면은 체포하겠다라고 했는데 실제로 넘었기 때문에 100명 이상이 체포됐습니다. 그중에는 이제 미성년자 5명도 포함이 됐었고 또 97세의 Reverend 목사도 포함이 됐었다라고 하는데요. 표현 보겠습니다. They staged a floating blockade.
Yes, a blockade is going to be some kind of barrier or barricade, something that stops things from going in or out. I know that Sue's favourite musical is Les Miserables.
Yes.
And in the second act, at the start, I think of the second act, there's a big blockade where the protesters in the city of Paris, they sort of get all the chairs and the tables and bits and pieces to stop people from coming through.
Yeah.
So here the blockade was a floating blockade made up of kayaks, canoes, basically. So people were in the water with their own individual vessel blocking the traffic.
blockade, 이 단어 안에 block가 들어있죠? 막다라는 단어가 들어있어서 알 수 있듯이 이제 그런 느낌이 살아있는 단어입니다.
Yeah.
자, 뭐냐면 봉쇄예요.
네. Not as delicious as lemonade or orangeade, though.
그렇죠. 레모네이드 뭐 하는 그런 에이드는 맛있는 음료가 되겠고 그거 아니고요. blockade, 봉쇄. And this resulted in more than 100 arrests.
Yes, if something results in something, that's what happens because of it.
Yes.
That's what happens due to it. It's the conclusion. So here, there was a protest, and the conclusion was 100 arrests were made. That was the result.
Result in A. A라는 결과를 낳다라는 뜻이 되겠죠. Well, here's the headline again. Climate activists in Australia staged a floating blockade of shipping traffic. Using a fleet of kayaks at the country's largest coal port over the weekend, resulting in more than 100 arrests.
Scientists say the world's largest iceberg, which is nearly 7 times the size of Seoul, is on the move for the first time in over 3 decades, propelled by strong winds and currents.
서울시의 약 7배에 달하는 크기를 가진 세계 최대 빙산이 30년 넘는 세월 동안 제자리를 지키다 최근 바람과 조류에 의해 이동 중인 것으로 나타났습니다. Tell us more.
Okay, the name of this Antarctic iceberg is A23A.
Okay.
Not the best name, to be honest, for an iceberg, but that's life.
Yes.
It's over something like 6 times the size of Seoul, 6 or 7 times. And satellite images have shown that it's drifting, and it's drifting past the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. So these strong winds and strong currents in the water are pushing it onwards. And they're predicting that it's going to be funneled towards the Southern Ocean. There's this pathway known as Iceberg Alley, where these icebergs, because of the way that the winds blow and the currents go, they get pushed into there. A couple of years ago, back in 2020, we had another one of these. A68 was the name of this iceberg. And they were worried it was actually going to collide with the mainland, with South Georgia. But it broke up into smaller chunks. So disaster was averted. There was no natural damage. They're thinking this could be a possible endgame for A23A as well. Time will tell, but certainly this giant iceberg is on the move.
Yeah, definitely cause for concern. Let's have a look at that expression you just mentioned there. Be on the move.
Meaning someone or something is moving, going somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's this expression, if you answer a phone call, sorry, I can't talk, I'm on the move. Meaning I'm on the subway or I'm walking or whatever it is. We use it as a term to just say someone or something is going somewhere.
이동 중이다 라고 할 때요. A is on the move. 나 이동 중이야. I'm on the move. 이렇게 표현하면 되겠고요. To propel, 볼까요?
Yes, propel means to push by force. If you're a fan of airplanes, older airplanes, then you'll know about propellers, which were those big fan-like objects on either side of the plane that turn around and around and around and push the plane forward and upward.
I was trying to find a propeller in this studio, but I can't.
I don't think we have any propellers at EBS.
프로펠러 아시죠? 자, 거기서 나온 동사라고 보시면 되겠습니다. To propel이라는 것은 확 이렇게 미는, 추진을 한다라는 뜻이 있는데 이 바람과 조류에 떠밀려서 움직인다 이렇게 보시면 되겠죠. Here's the headline again. Scientists say the world's largest iceberg, which is nearly 7 times the size of Seoul, is on the move for the first time in over 3 decades, propelled by strong winds and currents. And those are our headlines. And let's have a closer look at those one by one. This is our first headline.
The international price of gold has hit a 6-month high, surpassing $2,010 per ounce, helped by expectations of a pause in the Federal Reserve's monetary tightening.
미국 연방준비제도의 통화 긴축 중단에 대한 기대감으로 국제 금값이 온스당 2,010달러를 돌파해 최근 6개월 새 최고치를 기록했습니다. Right. So gold prices are up.
Yeah. So I don't know, we all have a little bit of gold at home, right? Well, I do because I have 2 kids.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we have our
The rings,
first year birthday parties called 돌 here. So I do have a little stash of gold. And I'm thinking, with the gold prices going up, should I go sell it? What should I do with it?
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking the same. So gold prices, it's hit a 6-month high. It's reached that key 2 $2,000 an ounce level. It's, of course, because of the weaker dollar and expectations of a pause in the Federal Reserve's monetary tightening. And experts are saying that gold is likely to trade around this $2,000 an ounce level for a little bit until we get some more information from the Fed on its plan on interest rates. And they're saying that the economic figures coming out from the U.S. this week, both on the growth and inflation front, will make or break a case for whether gold remains at that $2,000 point.
Right. So the Fed, of course, is the central bank of the United States. 미국의 중앙은행인 연방준비제도의 이런 통화 긴축 중단에 대한 기대감이라고 이렇게 표현을 하고 있는데요. 달러의 약세에 힘입어서 지금 이렇게 금값이 많이 올랐다라는 얘기가 되겠습니다. Let's have a look at the first vocabulary, which is to hit a high.
Right. So when we think of hit, we can think of it something physically, like reaching something or, getting to a certain point. So for hit here, it means to reach a certain level, point, or a figure. You can think of it as hitting a target.
Yeah. 여기서 동사 hit는요, reach랑 비슷한 느낌으로 어디에 도달하다, 어떤 지점까지 가다라는 뜻인데요. hit a high라고 하면은 최고 수준까지 올랐다가 되겠습니다. 자, 그 다음에는요. per ounce.
So per means for every or for each, and it's used with units to express a rate. We can hear it a lot when we're talking about meters per hour, when we're talking about speed rates. So my example sentence is oil prices have soared to a record high, reaching over 2,000 won per liter at some gas stations.
그래서 기름값이 많이 올랐기 때문에 일부 주유소에서는 리터당 2,000원 이상이다. 이런 얘기가 되겠죠. 그래서 per라는 게 A per B 그러면은 B당 A라는 뜻으로 지금 리터당 얼마 이렇게 얘기를 하셨죠. 헤드라인에서는 아운스당 얼마 이렇게 표현을 하고 있고요. $2,010 per ounce. 자, 그러면 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. The international price of gold has hit a 6-month high, surpassing $2,010 per ounce, helped by expectations of a pause in the Federal Reserve's monetary tightening. All right, moving on, this is headline number 2.
Israel and Hamas have agreed to extend their ceasefire for 2 more days, raising the prospect of further exchanges of hostages and a longer halt to their deadliest and most destructive war.
이스라엘과 팔레스타인 무장정파 하마스가 휴전을 이틀간 연장하기로 합의하면서 후속 인질 교환에 대한 기대감과 함께 양측 역사상 최악의 피해를 낳은 이번 전쟁의 중단 기간이 더 길어질 가능성이 높아졌습니다. Tell us more.
Right, so this is raising hopes for more hostage exchanges. The 4th swap of hostages took place with 11 Israeli women and children who were freed by Hamas entering Israel on Monday night after more than 7 weeks of captivity in Gaza. Earlier, on Tuesday, 33 Palestinian prisoners were released by Israel. And the deal for these 2 additional days of ceasefire, this was announced by Qatar. They've been kind of playing the mediator role in this conflict.
Right.
It's raising hopes, as we mentioned before, for further extensions. And this is expected to allow more aid into Gaza, which is, the conditions there have remained dire for the 2.3 million Palestinians there. The region's been battered by weeks of just bombardment and ground offensives that have driven 3/4 of the population from their homes.
Yeah, so as you said, it's an exchange. They're swapping the hostages that have been held in the Gaza Strip. They're being released, and in return for that, the people in Gaza are receiving help or aid, as you said. Let's look at the main vocabulary. The first one is to extend something.
Right. So in this case, we're talking about time. Yeah. So to extend something here, it means to make longer. But it can also apply to different things like area as well. So if something extends to a wider area, it means to make it wider. And also it can be used in the same verb form as to put something out, to extend something.
Oh, yeah.
Like extending your hand or extending your limb.
I think you can also say, I'd like to extend my gratitude.
Right, or apologies.
Yeah.
So many different ways to use this verb.
extend는요, 지금 이게 보라로 보시는 분들, 선생님이 이게 팔을 쭉 뻗은 거 보셨을 거예요. 그래서 이렇게 쭉 뻗는 이미지에서 여러 가지 뜻을 같이 기억하시면 되는데, extend someone's hand, 말 그대로 팔을 뻗을 때도 이 표현을 쓰고요. 아니면은 기간을 연장하는 겁니다. 그래서 여기서는 그런 의미가 되겠죠. ceasefire 기간이 이제 끝날 예정이었는데 그 기간을 연장한다.
Right.
또 다른 거는 이제 감사를 표하다라는 뜻인데 이것도 역시 이렇게 손을 내밀고 마치
Right.
그런 감사를 알려주는 것 같은 느낌으로도 말할 수 있습니다. extend. 자, 그 다음으로는요. raising the prospect of something.
Right. So prospect is the possibility or likelihood some sort of future event occurring. So here, it says it's raising the prospect of further exchange of hostages. So they're expecting more exchanges of hostages to happen in the future because this ceasefire has been extended. So my example sentence was, there was no prospect of a reconciliation despite several attempts to mediate peace.
prospect라는 게 어떤 가망이나 가능성을 얘기하고 있습니다. 평화 중재 노력이 여러 번 있음에도 불구하고 이렇게 화해의 어떤 가능성이 없어 보였다라는 예문을 지금 주셨고요. 다시 한번 헤드라인 읽어보겠습니다. Israel and Hamas have agreed to extend their ceasefire for 2 more days, raising the prospect of further exchanges of hostages and a longer halt to their deadliest and most destructive war.
Busan has lost its bid to host the 2030 World Expo, with the majority of member states from the Paris-based Bureau International Days Expositions favoring Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia.
파리에 본부를 둔 국제 박람회 기구 회원국 대다수가 사우디아라비아의 수도 리야드를 지지하면서 부산의 2030 세계 박람회 유치가 불발됐습니다. 오늘 새벽에 발표가 났죠. Unfortunately, Busan did not get the hosting rights for this, but tell us how it went, the voting and everything.
Right, so the vote, it took place behind closed doors in Issy-les-Moulineaux, a southwestern suburb of the French capital, and Riyadh. The vote, I think, number was overwhelmingly. They were overwhelmingly the winner. Busan got 29 votes. They were in second place, and Rome got 17 votes. Busan, they were doing everything they can to try to win the bid. They brought in cultural heavyweights. I think Psy was there to perform Gangnam style. And, the city was, of course, we've been hearing about Busan's bid to host the expo for quite some time now. They were trying to position itself as a high-tech expo, emphasizing its capabilities in AI, even 6G technology, with the aim of attracting millions of visitors and spurring job creation. But unfortunately, I think, the votes, they did go to the Saudi Arabian capital. They promoted a major public transit network and a futuristic space meant to show the vision of the country to pioneer a sustainable future for cities and their communities.
182 members altogether voted, and Riyadh won 119.
Yeah.
So it was a sweeping victory for
course.
Riyadh.
Yeah.
네, 압도적인 승리였습니다. 리야드는 총 182개 회원국의 투표 중에서 119개를 받았고요. 그다음에 이제 부산은 29표, 로마는 17표를 받으면서 압도적으로 리야드가 우승을 해서 더 이상의 보팅이 필요하지 않았죠.
Yeah.
거의 1차 투표에서 그냥 끝났습니다.
Right.
거기서 특이하게도 이제 과반이 아니라 3분의 2의 vote가 있으면 거기서 그냥 끝나는 거죠.
Right,
그렇게
right.
됐습니다. 네, so the 2030 Expo, as we now know, will be held in Riyadh.
In the Middle East. Yep.
네, 이제 그동안 수고하신 많은 분들 고생 정말 많으셨고요. 자, 표현 한번 보도록 하겠습니다. Busan's bid to host
Right.
something.
Right. The bid to do something. It means to make an effort, to attempt, or to achieve something. You might have also heard it as the bid for something as well.
The bid to do something. 뭐뭐 하려고 하는 노력이나 시도라고 볼 수 있겠죠. 그래서 그동안에 Busan's bid to host the expo in 2030, well, that unfortunately ended in a loss for Busan, but a win for Riyadh.
Yep.
A bid to do something. 자, 그 다음은요. favor라는 동사입니다.
Right. To favor, it means to feel or show approval or preference for. So, for example, the selection committee decided to favor the innovative proposal.
favor 누구누구 아니면 무엇 하면은 누군가를 지지하거나 누구의 편을 들다라는 뜻이 있겠고요. 여기서는 이제 파리에 본부를 둔 국제 박람회 기구가 리야드를 favor했다.
Right.
리야드를 선호하고 지지했다라고 보면 되겠죠.
Yep.
네, 그래서 다수의 표를 획득했다고 해석을 할 수 있겠습니다. Here's the headline again. Busan has lost its bid to host the 2030 World Expo, with the majority of member states from the Paris-based Bureau International des Expositions favoring Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia.
New Zealand has sworn in its first Minister of Korean Heritage, Melissa Jian-Lee, as Minister for Economic Development, Media and Communications, and Ethnic Communities.
뉴질랜드가 새 정부의 경제개발부, 소수민족부, 미디어통신부 등 3개 부서 장관으로 멜리사 지언 리 의원을 임명함에 따라 뉴질랜드 최초의 한국계 장관이 탄생했습니다. Right. Tell us about Melissa Jian Lee, and we're very proud because she is Korean born, even though she's a New Zealander.
Right, right. So she has a lot of firsts. She actually became the first New Zealand lawmaker of Korean heritage as a member of the National Party back in 2008.
Yeah.
And now she is the first Korean-born minister for New Zealand. So a very proud moment for, Koreans, ethnic Koreans who are living abroad, definitely, and in New Zealand. So as we mentioned, she's taken office as the Minister for Economic Development, Ethnic Communities, Media and Communications. And what was very interesting, I think if you've seen her reading out her ministerial oath, she did it in English and in Korean, kind of going, back and forth between the two different languages during the inauguration ceremony, which was held at the government building in Wellington, which is the New Zealand capital. So a little bit of information about her. She was born in Korea. She immigrated to New Zealand in 1988, and she's worked as a reporter and anchor for 20 years in public broadcasting, and she became well known for leading programs on Asian culture and current issues.
She was born in, I think it was 1966 in Korea, and then she moved to Malaysia.
Right.
She spent her childhood there, and then she studied was it communications in Australia? And then, as you said, as a young adult, she moved to New Zealand in 88. She used to be a TV anchor, a news presenter as well. And she worked in broadcasting for 20 years. And then she became a politician in 2018. And here she is today. 네, 멜리사 지연리. 우리말로는 그러니까 이지연입니다. 본명은. 그렇지만 이제 영어 이름은 멜리사 지연리가 되겠고요. 그 선서를 할 때 영어로 하고 그다음에 우리말로 하고 처음이죠. 이게 우리말로 할 그런 Korean descent인 사람이 없었으니까 이 선서하는 거를 영어로는 take an oath라고 합니다. So she took the oath in both English and Korean. And it was the first time, a very proud moment for us here, for that oath to be taken in Korean. Let's have a look at the main terms. She is of Korean heritage.
Right, Korean heritage. When we talk about heritage, we're talking about our ethnic roots, including our cultural teachings, maybe even personal experiences. So my example sentence is ethnic Koreans living abroad are often very proud of their Korean heritage.
네. 그 한국의 유산, 혈통, 문화 이런 것들을 다 두루두루 heritage라고 부를 수 있어요. 그래서 외국에서 살고 있는 한국계 그런 외국인들 같은 경우는 자신이 한국 그런 혈통이라는 것에 대해서 굉장히 자랑스럽게 생각한다. 이런 예문이었고요. Ethnic communities. So she has several titles here, but one of those is the Minister of Ethnic Communities.
Right. So ethnic means belonging to a population group or subgroup made up of people who share a common cultural background or descent. So when we talk about ethnic Koreans, we're talking about Koreans, who share that sort of common heritage that might not just be living in Korea, but are living all over the world. And the community, we're talking about a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common.
Yes, ethnic communities는 소수민족 공동체가 되겠죠. 저도 찾아보니까 이제 뉴질랜드에서는 상당히 많은 부서들이
Yes.
있더라고요.
Yeah.
그래가지고 이번에 이 3개 부서의 장관이 됐는데 그 중에 하나가 바로 여기 Ethnic Communities 부서라고 하는 소수민족부가 되겠습니다. Alright, so if you have the chance, you can look it up. It's online where she takes the oath in English and in Korean as well. It's a beautiful moment there. Here's the headline again. New Zealand has sworn in its first Minister of Korean Heritage, Melissa Cheon-lee, as Minister for Economic Development, Media and Communications, and Ethnic Communities. And let's move on to the next headline.
A historic collection of ancient treasures, including Scythian and Sarmatian jewelry, has been returned to Ukraine after a nearly 10-year dispute over its ownership with Russia.
스키타이족과 사르마티아인들의 장신구를 비롯한 역사적 고대 유물 다수가 10년 가까운 러시아와의 소유권 분쟁 끝에 우크라이나로 반환됐습니다. Alright, tell us more.
Right, so as we mentioned, there's been a nearly 10-year dispute over the ownership of these historic items, and 565 items, including jewelry, sculptures, they are back from the Netherlands. This collection, it was mostly from Crimean museums. It was on loan to Amsterdam's Allard Pearson Museum when Russia annexed Ukraine back in 2014. So this dispute occurred because both Ukraine and Russia, they wanted to claim these items.
Right.
But the Dutch courts backed Ukraine. So the artifacts will stay in the museum until the quote-unquote deoccupation of Crimea.
So it's been returned from the Netherlands. And you mentioned the word Dutch there. That is the word they use when they talk about the people or something
the
to
Netherlands,
do.
yes.
Yes, that's right, of the Netherlands. 자, 표현 보겠습니다. Historic collection.
Right, historic collection. We talk about, something that's historic. It means it's famous or important in history or has the potential of being so. So we're talking about a collection of things. It's a group of similar things that you have deliberately acquired, usually over a period of time. So for example, the historic collection of Goryeo pottery will be on display throughout this month.
네, 역사적인 유물 다수를 historic collection이라고 할 수 있겠죠. 그래서 고려 자기 그런 모음 여러 개가 이달 내내 전시가 될 것이다 라는 예문이었고요. And a dispute over one's ownership.
Right, so a dispute is a disagreement or an argument or a debate, and ownership is that right of possessing something or the right to possession. So if there is a dispute over something's ownership, it means people or groups are fighting over who has possession over something.
Yes, dispute over something's ownership. 그래서 무언가의 소유권에 대한 분쟁이 되겠습니다. Here's the headline again. A historic collection of ancient treasures, including Scythian and Sarmatian jewelry, has been returned to Ukraine after a nearly 10-year dispute over its ownership with Russia. I won.
The nation's total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman bears in her lifetime, came to a record low of 0.7 in the third quarter, with the number of newborns falling by the most in about 3 years in September.
우리나라에서 가임 여성 1명이 평생 낳을 것으로 예상되는 아이 수를 가리키는 합계 출산율이 올 3분기에 0.7명이라는 역대 최저 수준을 기록했습니다. 출생아 수도 9월 기준으로 3년 만에 가장 큰 폭으로 감소했습니다. Tell us more, Ray.
So the total fertility rate, as we mentioned, came to a record low of 0.7 in the third quarter, and this is down 0.1% from percentage points from a year earlier. And this is obviously much lower than the replacement level of 2.1, which would keep Korea's population stable at 51 million. That's according to Statistics Korea.
인구를 스테이블하게 유지하기 위해서는 합계 출산율이 2.1 돼야 된다고 하셨나요? 2.1 did you say?
That's right. That's the replacement level.
Yeah.
So it's quite a lot lower than that.
네, 근데 실제로는 합계 출산율이 2.1보다 훨씬 낮은 0.7로 기록이 됐습니다. 이제 이번 올해 3분기가 그렇고요. 역대 최저 수준이에요. Well, we've been hearing that less and less women are having children, and this is evident now in the data.
Yeah, it sure is. So the other part of the headline talks about what happened just in September alone. So just over 18,000 babies were born in the month of September in Korea. That's down 14.6% compared to September of last year. And that's the sharpest year-over-year fall since November 2020.
아, 그래요. 9월 달에 또 새로 태어난 아기들도 3년 만에 가장 큰 폭으로 감소한 14.6% 줄어든 수치였다고 합니다. 18,000, just over 18,700. Yeah,
18,707 to be exact.
I see. Let's have a look at this expression here. The number of children a woman bears in her lifetime.
Right, so bear as a verb has several meanings. In this case, it means to give birth, to produce a baby.
Yeah.
Right? You bear a baby, you have a baby. So other things, like, so for example, trees can bear fruit or bear flowers.
Right.
Bonds, savings bonds, bear interest. So we can use it that way as well. They produce interest. Now, it can also be used to talk about responsibility. You can bear responsibility for something, like, you bear responsibility for your children or for your job. You can also, sometimes you might be told you need to bear the cost of something. You need to pay for that thing. So there's lots of ways we can use it.
As
The
a
word,
verb.
yes,
Yeah.
lots of ways. And the other big one is to endure something or to really tolerate something difficult. You might hear people say, "Oh, I just can't bear it anymore. I can't bear this," whatever that tough situation is.
Exactly.
And there's the old phrase, to grin and bear it, if you're going to have to deal with a difficult situation, but there's no way out of it. Someone might say to you, okay, you need to just grin and bear it. Means smile and pretend like everything's okay and just accept the difficult situation.
네, grin and bear it. 이거 grin은 미소 짓는 거고요. bear는 참는 겁니다. 그래서 가끔 이런 얘기를 하죠. 아무리 힘들어도 그냥 아무 일 없는 척하고 미소 지으면서 꾹 참어. Grin and bear it. 자, 그때 bear는 여기 헤드라인에 나온 bear랑 좀 다르긴 해요. 그렇지만 둘 다 동사입니다. 자, 동사로서의 bear가 가지고 있는 여러 가지 의미 중에서 여기서 말하는 거는 아이를 낳다라는 뜻이에요. So the number of children a woman bears in her lifetime. 일평생 동안 여성이 낳는 아이의 수를 이렇게 그 레이트로 비율로 얘기를 하죠. 그래서 이번에 0.7이 나온 것인데 그런 bear 말고도 그 책임을 지다, bear responsibility. 그리고 비용을 부담하다, bear the cost of something. 이렇게 쓸 수도 있습니다. 뜻은 굉장히 많아요. And moving on to the next expression, it's falling by the most in 3 years.
Right, the biggest decline.
Yeah.
Very simple, very straightforward.
네, 3년 만에 가장 많이 떨어졌다, 가장 많이 감소했다. Falling by the most in 3 years.
And you could also, in other things, you could say it rose by the most. You could also have that, and you could change in 3 years. And when it says in about 3 years, means roughly, not quite.
That's right.
But you could have that. It rose by the most in 10 years. It rose by the most in a decade. We've seen inflation rise, over the last couple of years, rise more than it has in decades, right? Since like the 80s.
Indeed. 자, about 3 years라고 했으니까 이제 약 3년이 되겠죠. Here's the headline again. The nation's total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman bears in her lifetime, came to a record low of 0.7 in the third quarter, with the number of newborns falling by the most in about 3 years in September. All right, and moving on, this is our second headline.
The Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education has announced that English tutor robots will be introduced to a select number of schools next year to assist in students' one-on-one English conversations.
서울시 교육청이 내년부터 일부 학교에 영어 튜터 로봇을 보급해 학생들과의 1대1 회화 수업, 영어 회화 수업에 활용하도록 할 방침입니다. Okay, so robots.
Not good news for people who work in the English language industry.
그럴 수도 있겠네요.
Very bad news for teachers who have, and most teachers have been experiencing a decline or a steady state of their salaries for over 10 years in Korea. So this is only going to make teaching English less attractive to foreigners.
이게 재밌네요. 왜냐면은 사실 저는 그냥 학부모로서 이 뉴스를 처음 접했을 때 와, 너무 좋다라고 생각을 했었는데 이제 영어 선생님 일도 하시는 우리 레이 선생님의 입장을 들어보니까 영어 그 회화 선생님으로서는 원어민으로서는 이건 너무 bad news다.
They've got money to put into robots, but no money to pay teachers.
우리 일자리를 빼앗는 로봇이다. 이렇게도 다른 측면에서 볼 수 있겠죠. So they're going to have these robots in just a small number of schools, though, right?
Right,
Not
a select
many.
number of schools.
Yeah.
So when you see that, a select number, you know it means not very many. It'll be quite exclusive. In this case, they're only going to be at 5 elementary and middle schools. That's how it was worded in English. I don't know if that means 5 total or 5 and 5. It wasn't clear.
I believe it's 5 altogether. I'll have
5
to double
altogether.
check.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. And then that will start the trial run in March. And these AI installed robots, they're going to resemble like how they type of thing you see in restaurants.
Right.
So they'll be capable of communicating with students in English and offering customized one-on-one learning.
네, customized one-on-one
Apparently,
learning.
for a robot. I think teachers are better at that personally, but yeah.
그래요. 그 customized 그럼 맞춤식이라는 뜻이 되겠고요. 이런 로봇이 이제 내년 3월부터 신학기부터 서울에 있는 일부 학교에 일단은 어느 trial run으로 시범으로 일단은 활용이 되는 것이죠. 5 schools is what we know, but it could be expanded or not. They might decide it's not a good idea or it is a good idea. We'll have to wait and see.
It's probably what's ever going to be cheaper, I'm sure. I don't know.
Okay, so we've already looked at the first expression, which is a select number of something, and that just means
Few.
yeah.
A few amount, right?
Yeah. 그러니까 지정된 몇 안 되는 이런 뜻이에요. A select number of schools. 그 다음에는 to assist.
Assist just means to help. In sports, we talk like in some sports they record assists. Basketball, hockey, soccer too. If you pass the ball or the puck to the player, that scores. It's called an assist because you helped them.
Yeah.
But you can just use it meaning to help, right? Oh, can I assist you with that? Do you need some assistance?
이렇게 명사로 an assist 라고 했을 때는 허키나 아니면 축구에서도 이런 표현 많이 쓰잖아요. 돕는다라는 뜻이 있고 그 다음에 또 동사로서도 역시 마찬가지입니다. 돕는다라는 의미인데 여기서는 학생들의 1대1 영어 회화 수업에 있어서 도움이 되도록 이런 로봇들을 활용할 예정이라고 합니다. So these robots are going to help students basically.
That's the goal of it.
That's the goal.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the goal.
All
Hopefully
right.
it works out. Or hopefully it doesn't, and then teachers
Yeah.
can get jobs and
Yeah,
maybe
well,
get raises.
we'll wait and
Probably
see.
not. I'm not holding my breath on it.
그래요. It's going to be on a trial run이라는 표현이 있습니다. 시범으로 일단 운행이 된다는 거고요. 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. The Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education has announced that English tutor robots will be introduced to a select number of schools next year to assist in students' one-on-one English conversations.
UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has cancelled a meeting with his Greek counterpart amid a diplomatic row over which of the two nations should hold a collection of ancient Greek sculptures.
리시 수낙 영국 총리가 그리스 총리와의 정상회담을 취소했습니다. 이번 일은 일부 고대 그리스 조각상의 소유 문제를 놓고 양국이 외교적 갈등을 빚던 중 벌어졌습니다. Alright, tell us more, Ray.
Well, yeah, a bit of one of my favorite words here, one of my favorite British words, as I'll call it, is a row.
Row, yeah,
right? There's a bit of a row going on, so that just means a fight. When we see diplomatic row, it means countries are having a little squabble.
Yeah.
So this definitely is they're having a bit of a fight right now.
Yeah.
So the two countries have actually long argued over what's called the Parthenon sculptures or the Elgin marbles. They were once part of the Temple of Athena in Athens. But for years and years, they've been part of the permanent collection at London's British Museum.
Right.
However, in 1983, Greece formally requested these sculptures to be returned. In 2009, they built a museum, Acropolis Museum in Athens, but they still have not been able to come to any agreement on the return of these ancient artifacts.
That's getting in the way of this summit.
Well, right. So Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, I think he's still in England, or he was there. He was meant to meet Sunak on Tuesday. However, on Sunday, he was speaking to the BBC, and he mentioned about having only half of the Elgin marbles are in the UK. And he said he likened it to cutting the Mona Lisa in half. And he mentioned they had been essentially stolen from Greece. Now, BBC looked into this. They talked to representatives at 10 Downing Street, and they said that Sunak and the administration, they had received assurances that Mitsotakis would not mention the Elgin marbles while he was in the UK. A Greek official denied this. So they're saying, you said you wouldn't say it. You went on BBC and mentioned this. We're not meeting you. Mitsotakis is saying, oh, I cannot believe this. We never agreed to this. Says he's baffled and annoyed that Sunak would snub him.
When you're baffled, that means you're really surprised. What?
You just can't understand what happened. It doesn't make sense to you.
자, 이 고대 파르테논 조각 때문에 이제 갈등이 있다라고 헤드라인에선 나왔는데요. 구체적으로 지금 설명을 해주셨습니다. 레이 선생님 얘기를 듣고 보니까 이런 거죠. 그리스의 총리가 영국을 방문하면서 BBC 방송에서 지금 영국에 전시되어 있는 이 파르테논 조각들이 일부가 여기 있다 보니까 마치 모나리자 반쪽은 그 자국에 있고 반쪽은 타국에 있는 것 같은 그런 형상이다. 이건 말이 안 된다. 본국으로 얼른 돌려줘라. 이런 취지의 얘기를 했다는 겁니다. 그러고 나서 이제 원래 정상회담이 열렸어야 되는데 영국 측에서는 이번에 영국 오면서 그 조각상 얘기 안 하기로 한 걸로 알고 있는데 왜 저기 방송에 나가서 그런 얘기를 했느냐. 이거는 말이 다른 거 아니냐. 영국 측의 입장이고요. 그리스 측에서는 우린 그런 약속한 적이 없다. 그래서 baffled. 할 말을 잃은 거죠. 뭐야 이게. 이런 충돌이 좀 있었던 모양입니다. 자, 표현을 볼게요. We're talking about the UK Prime Minister and his counterpart.
Yeah, counterpart is just someone who does the same job as you in a different organization or different government. There might be different titles, but you have the same rank and relatively the same responsibilities.
counterpart는 대등한 위치에 있는 상대방입니다. 영국 총리와 his counterpart. 근데 그리스의 counterpart니까 그리스 총리가 되겠죠. 이게 뭐 미국이면은 미국의 대통령이 되겠고요. 대등한 위치에 있는 상대가 되겠습니다. 영국 측에서 취소를 했다고 했어요. 왜냐하면은 앞서 말씀드린 것처럼 그리스 총리가 이런 얘기를 하지 않기로 한 것으로 그렇게 영국에서는 알고 있었는데 방송을 해버리니까 그리스 입장에서는 또 굉장히 유감이다. 왜 갑자기 취소를 하느냐 이런 입장이래요. Well, there's a diplomatic row that happened.
Right, as I mentioned, that's when you see diplomatic, you know that it means relations between countries.
Yes.
So they're having a little fight right now. Little spat, a little argument, a little squabble.
That's right.
Quarrel.
네, 다 마찬가지 단어들입니다. They all mean the same thing. Spat, squabble, row, fight. row라는 단어, R-O-W 이렇게 쓰고요. 발음은 반드시 row라고 하셔야 됩니다. row라고 하면 안 돼요. row는 노를 저을 때, row, row, row your boat 할 때 쓰는 전혀 다른 뜻입니다. 스펠링만 똑같아요. diplomatic row는 외교적인 마찰이 되겠습니다. Here's the headline again. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has cancelled a meeting with his Greek counterpart amid a diplomatic row over which of the two nations should hold a collection of ancient Greek sculptures.
At least 10 people have died and thousands remain cut off from the power grid in Ukraine in 3 days of stormy weather that has blanketed parts of the country in heavy snow.
우크라이나 일부 지역을 폭설로 뒤덮은 사흘간의 폭풍으로 최소 10명이 사망하고 수천 명이 정전 피해를 입었습니다. What's happening over in Ukraine?
Oh yeah, unfortunately, like at least 10 people have died. Around 23 people were injured, even some children. That's according to the Interior Ministry of Ukraine. They mentioned that more than 400 settlements across 11 regions in the country were without electricity. They've got over 1,500 responders trying to reach people who are in need of rescue. The south apparently is where it's really been hit the hardest.
And it's winter time, so I mean they need electricity more than ever.
Exactly. It's just
아이고, 피해가 뭐 어마어마하네요. 11개 지역에서 지금 수천 명이 정전 피해를 입고 있고 지금 그때 한겨울이기 때문에 그래서 눈도 많이 오고 그러는 상황인데 피해가 좀 많은 것 같습니다.
Even Russian-controlled Crimea is being affected. They're saying around 93,000 people in Crimea are without electricity.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So that's, the Russians will have to try and solve that problem.
Well, let's have a look at the main terms. The first one is to cut off from something.
It means you've been separated from that.
To be cut off, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes you might hear about, parents cutting off their children from financial support. They've cut off financial support. You're cut off. We're not giving you any more money.
cut off라는 게 끊다라는 뜻이 있어요. 그래서 be cut off라고 쓸 수도 있겠고 cut off something이라고 표현할 수도 있겠습니다. 누구로부터 무언가를 단절하다, 끊다. 자, 그다음에 blanket라는 동사가 나왔습니다.
Think about your blanket at night when you go to bed. It covers you.
Yeah.
So when you use blanket as a verb, it just means to cover something completely. So I always remember waking up on Christmas morning and looking outside and just seeing like my whole yard and the town just blanketed in snow.
Yeah.
And it was such a great feeling.
blanket라는 동사는요, 완전히 뒤덮였다라는 의미로 보통 이렇게 온 세상이 하얗게 뒤덮였을 때 the whole town is blanketed in snow라고 할 수도 있겠고요. And other weather phenomenon as well, I think you could talk about.
Smog.
Blanketed in smog.
fog,
그럴 수
mist,
있겠네요.
that kind of thing.
그러네요. 네, 이렇게 안개나 스모그에 뒤덮인 도시 얘기할 때도 blanketed in fog 이렇게 표현할 수 있습니다. Here's the headline again. At least 10 people have died and thousands remain cut off from the power grid in Ukraine in 3 days of stormy weather that's blanketed parts of the country in heavy snow. Let's move on to the final headline.
41 construction workers in India have been safely rescued after being trapped inside a collapsed road tunnel for more than 2 weeks.
인도에서 공사 중이던 터널이 붕괴해 2주 이상 갇혀있던 인부 41명이 무사히 구조됐습니다.
What an incredible story.
I know. All 41 workers have been rescued.
Nobody was seriously injured, even, or obviously no one was killed. No one died in this. There was a landslide that caused a 4.5 kilometer section of a tunnel, which was about 200 meters, to collapse. About 200 meters from the entrance, sorry. So they were workers. They were all like... this happened on November 12th. This was in India's northern state of Uttarakhand. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's west of Nepal, so it's in the very north of India. And right, so during this whole ordeal, the workers, they did have some light inside the tunnel. They were provided with food and water and oxygen through pipes. Doctors, and including psychiatrists, were on site to monitor their health. Apparently, this story really captivated India. Like everybody, this became a real big news story in the country. So, obviously, people were really celebrating during this, and it was right during Diwali, the big festival,
Festival of Lights.
Yeah, right. It was during that as well. Like the day it happened was the day that started. So these workers were getting ready to go and celebrate, and then had to deal with this. So quite a story. And they thought it was going to actually be very straightforward, but there was a series of setbacks. So during this final stretch of when they were trying to save them, this was overnight on Monday and into Tuesday, they ended up having to dig by hand because the machines they were using broke down.
Oh dear.
So a lot of people working, and it was successful. So it's a really great story.
Yeah, but I mean, just imagine 2 weeks without really knowing.
17 days.
Oh, well, more than 2 weeks then.
More than
Yeah,
2, can you believe that?
17 days.
Right.
Of not knowing when or if you were going to get out.
Yeah.
17일 동안이나 이렇게 터널에 갇혀 있었던 인부 41명 모두 무사히 구조됐다고 합니다. 물론 이제 다 병원에 가서 건강 상태가 어떤지 확인은 해야 되지만 큰 뭐 부상이나 그런 것들은 없었다고 해서 정말 다행인데요. 11월 12일에 터널이 이렇게 붕괴해서 그때부터 쭉 17일 동안 갇혀 있었던 인부들 41 workers had been trapped.
If you're trapped, you're stuck. You can't go anywhere. You can't move. You're trapped inside somewhere. Usually it's in an area. If you're in prison, you're trapped behind bars.
Yeah.
You can also, like a trap is also a noun. You
Like a
set a
mouse
trap, mouse trap, bear trap. Right.
Yeah, 그렇죠. Be trapped는 갇히다 라는 뜻이고요. 우리 그 쥐덫을 영어로는 mouse trap라고 얘기를 합니다. 명사로도 쓸 수 있는 거죠. 자, 그 다음에 to collapse.
Something collapses, it falls down, it crumbles.
Yeah.
Usually we're talking about structures, but a person can collapse as well. They faint, for example, they just fall down, they collapse, fall to the ground.
그럼요. 무너지다라는 뜻으로 사람도 무너질 수 있죠. 뭐 정말 이렇게 엄청난 충격을 받는다든지 이럴 때. 근데 보통은 이제 구조물에 대해서 많이 씁니다. Something has collapsed. Well, here's the headline again. 41 construction workers in India have been safely rescued after being trapped inside a collapsed road tunnel for more than 2 weeks.